If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. City, country, and what you were drinking the last time life surprised you. Because mine was champagne, or it was supposed to be. The glass slipped from my daughter-in-law's hand the instant her heels hit the marble. Jessica's mother, Helen, lay convulsing on my kitchen floor, foam kissing the corners of her mouth, while the rest of the room froze the way people do when reality makes a sound they don't recognize. I'm 70. I built a consulting firm from nothing after my husband died and sold it 2 hours earlier for $23 million. You don't survive that world by being stupid. So, when the body on my tiles wasn't mine, the only thought that cut through the sirens in my head was cold and clean. That wasn't supposed to happen to her. Let me rewind 10 minutes and one bad decision. My son Michael, soft voice, brown eyes, a smile that used to melt teachers into extra credit, insisted on throwing the party. Mom, you deserve it. Let Jessica handle everything. If you've ever met the sort of woman who complains that dishwashers wash wrong, imagine her suddenly transformed into Martha Stewart under deadline. Flowers, crystal, a private bartender who knew how to hold court without stealing it. 30 guests, ex-clients, a few neighbors, family, and the smell of victory rising from a charcuterie board so large it needed a building permit. Here's what no one else saw. Across the room, Jessica glanced left, then right, like she'd lost a contact lens and found a conscience. She slipped a tiny bottle from her purse, the kind essential oils pretend they come from, and tipped its throat over a flute on the end, the one with the little chip on the rim I never throw out because it's mine. My stomach went to ice. My smile didn't move. A sensible person might have screamed, and I would love to be the sort of woman who mistakes decency for wisdom. But I've spent 45 years learning that snakes strike highest when you offer them your throat. So I let her bring it to me, all daughterly concern and breathy kindness. Sarah, you look tired. Have some champagne. I took it. I thanked her. I chatted about market trends with my retired partner while counting Jessica's steps, her tells, her eagerness to be seen not watching me. When she turned to show the neighbors a tennis bracelet loud enough to finance an orthodontist, I drifted. Helen stood nearby, small, polite, perpetually misplaced at parties. I set my flute down by her purse. She smiled the way women of her generation apologize for taking up oxygen and lifted the glass that had been mine. She sipped, twice, 3 times. Interesting flavor, she murmured to me 5 minutes later. Where did you get this? Then the floor kissed her, and the room forgot how to breathe. Call 911. Jessica's scream broke the ice around everyone else. The bartender vaulted the island. Someone slid a rug under Helen's head. Michael's hands shook so hard he dialed the wrong number and swore like a child caught cursing. I knelt, turned Helen gently, watched her pupils, timed the spasms. Panic looks one way on the honest and another on the guilty. I have spent a lifetime reading budgets and faces. Jessica's performance was nearly perfect. Nearly. St. Mary's, the paramedic said when I asked which hospital. Are you family? Close enough, I told him, and watched my son's face miscalculate. Mom, you should rest. We'll handle this. Michael's concern was the kind that sets a place at the table for you while checking if you've updated your will. Nonsense, I said, grabbing my keys. Helen is practically family. 2 more things happened that will matter later. 1. Our HOA's crowned gossip, a neighbor named Clarice, whose soul is 90% Pilates and 10% Instagram, lifted her phone to capture memories, as if the algorithm sent Ambien and casserole to the bereaved. 2. My not entirely dumb smart home, recently installed to appease an insurance discount, blinked its tiny red recording light atop the fridge. I noticed because I notice things. It's a habit. It saves lives. Hospitals smell like new plastic on old fear. In fluorescent daylight, Jessica paced, her heels ticking time like a metronome set to alibi. Michael sat stiff and pale, phone buzzing, eyes not moving, a man trying to hold still while the truth rearranges his furniture. Acute poisoning, a doctor said to a nurse within my earshot. Plant alkaloids. The phrasing didn't belong to food poisoning or bad shrimp. It belonged to gardens and mistakes you don't survive. Terrible, Jessica kept saying, as if repetition could make her shock genuine. Poor Mom. How could this happen? I patted her arm. We'll know soon enough. Thank heavens she didn't drink much. Only a few sips. It was the tiniest nudge, a stone dropped from a pocket into a calm pond. Jessica's face flickered. Champagne? She asked, too fast. You think it was the champagne? Oh, I'm sure it's nothing, I said, letting the fish taste the hook. A volunteer nurse passed by with a tray and a whisper to another. Weird, bitter smell on the breath, like crushed greenery. Almond adjacent, if you've ever oversteeped the wrong thing. The doctor returned later. Stable, overnight, inconclusive, because hospitals hate making enemies with words like poison before dinner. When we left, Michael offered me the suggestion a second time. Stay with them, be safe, let adulthood reclaim a mother's autonomy. I kissed his cheek and drove home alone, the way women who are not done living do. In my kitchen, new bottle, fresh cork, one glass. Not a celebration so much as a pledge. I would not be managed. At 5 a.m., coffee and a legal pad. You learn a lot by writing with a pen. Numbers decide to tell the truth. Michael's firm. Post-recession limp. Jessica's jewelry business. A cashmere soft sinkhole. Mortgage stacked on a refinance stacked on a line of credit, like a child playing Jenga with someone else's house. 2 cars, unowned. Tuition I paid because love made me soft and memory made me generous. 200,000 over 5 years. Gifts for happiness that now felt like chum in greedy water. The 7:30 call, Jessica, too bright, asking if I felt off after the party. Because food can be tricky and Mom's medications. Jessica, I said gently. Helen organizes vitamins with military precision, and I feel fine. Her silence bought itself a nervous laugh. I walked to the counter. The party bottle sat there, sullen and 3/4 full, the way guilt is when it thinks it's gotten away with something. Evidence isn't for me. I know what I saw. Evidence is for when people decide truth should be a debate. Labs exist for that. At 9, Michael appeared with pastries from my favorite bakery. The gesture tasted like childhood and strategy. He arranged them in my kitchen with muscle memory and a sorrow that looked almost honest. Almost. You're 70, Mom, he said eventually, because scripts require their lines. It's a lot to manage. We found a place. Sunset Manor. It's like a resort, really. He slid his phone across the table. Smiles, pools, bridge, a spa, the antiseptic joy of facilities with competent PR. Entrance fee is $400,000, but it covers everything, he added, casual as a thief weighing silverware in his palm. I stared at a photo of an elderly man throwing a beach ball in an indoor pool, like someone had photoshopped dignity out of his frame. I thought about power of attorney policies stapled to admission packets, and how quickly comfort becomes a cage when a signature makes your voice optional. I told him what good sons and good stories want to hear. I'll think about it. He smiled the way people do when they win before they've earned anything. When he left, I watched the driveway camera feed, because now I had one, as he and Jessica sat in their car for 10 long minutes. She called someone. He tried to take the phone. She didn't let him. If you've ever seen two people argue about how fast a fuse should burn, you know the choreography. Tonight, I told myself, the offense begins. You do not live 70 years to become a lesson in what money does to people. If you're still with me, leave a comment with the most expensive mistake you never let anyone make for you. I'm going to show you the difference between being old and being overruled. Hospitals at midnight hum like cheap fluorescent beehives, too bright to be comforting, too sterile to trust. The scent of disinfectant can't hide the smell of adrenaline and fear. Helen lay behind a curtain, heart monitor beeping a rhythm that sounded more human than any voice in the room. Jessica's heels clicked up and down the linoleum, counting seconds, counting lies. Michael sat rigid beside the vending machine, every muscle in his face doing PR for the family image. I sat near the nurse's station pretending to read a People magazine from 2018 while my mind ran forensic calculations. Plant alkaloids. That's what the doctor had murmured. Not seafood. Not bad oysters. Plant poison. I'd once negotiated mergers worth hundreds of millions. People think business is about numbers. It's really about reading when someone's heartbeat changes mid-sentence. Jessica's was a strobe light. Michael's was silence. The night nurse, a young man named Rico, brought me coffee. "Your friend's lucky," he said softly. "Poisoning cases don't usually look this good after 5 minutes." Poisoning. He said it like he didn't realize the word should have been whispered. My pulse steadied. Confirmation. At 2 a.m., the on-call doctor appeared, clipboard tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Peterson is stable. We're running toxicology. Preliminary signs point to oleander. Very potent, but we caught it early." He moved on before I could thank him. Oleander. A garden ornament turned murder weapon. Jessica froze mid-pace. Did he say oleander? Her voice cracked on the second syllable. Michael touched her elbow. She flinched like his skin burned. I sipped the coffee and let silence do what truth often can't, make people feel it. "Sarah," Jessica started, forcing a smile. "Maybe someone brought flowers from the garden? Could be cross-contamination." She was workshopping her future defense out loud. "Possible," I said, "but oleander is deadly even in tiny amounts. One wonders why anyone would keep it around food or drink." Rico looked up. "We found trace dust on a glass," he said to the doctor. Jessica stopped breathing for half a second, then remembered to inhale. It was beautiful acting. Almost. By sunrise, Helen was sedated and stable. The doctor offered family-only visitation. Jessica cried on cue. Michael consoled her on script. When the elevator doors closed on their faces, I caught our reflection in the metal, me behind them, eyes open. Predator and prey separated only by lighting. Outside, rain had washed the parking lot clean, except for a glitter trail of broken champagne crystals stuck to my heels. Proof always tries to follow you home. 7 a.m., my kitchen again. Coffee fresh, mind sharp. I logged onto the private server of my old consulting firm, Habits Die Hard, and looked up a contact. David Hartwell, attorney and occasional bulldog in a suit. I left a voicemail. "David, urgent. Possible criminal matter intersecting with estate issues. Call me." Then I did what executives do best. I gathered intel. A quick scroll through Instagram showed Clarice, the neighbor with a content problem, had posted stories from the party. Boomerangs of toasts, selfies with champagne glasses, one wide shot of Jessica at the bar table. I screen recorded it before she deleted it at 4 a.m. The angle was poor, but visible. A tiny vial in Jessica's hand, reflection caught in the bar's mirror. Social media vanity, the digital fingerprint of murder. At 8 a.m., my phone buzzed. David. Sarah, you sound troubled. What happened? I told him. He didn't interrupt until I finished. You need to preserve evidence, he said. Don't accuse anyone yet. Have the bottle tested discreetly. And Sarah, be careful. If they planned once, they'll plan twice. His warning echoed later that morning when Jessica called. Her tone was honey on ice. Sarah, Mom's awake. Doctors say it was probably an interaction with something she ate. You didn't feel sick, did you? No, darling, fit as ever. Pause. I suppose they'll run more tests? Oh, they don't think it's necessary. Too fast, too rehearsed. Good. Wouldn't want to trouble them. When I hung up, I forwarded David the Instagram video with one line. The snake shows its fangs on camera. That afternoon, Michael arrived again, his guilt packaged in a white pastry box. Same script, new scene. He poured coffee, talked about aging, safety, retirement homes. I listened the way a hunter listens to wind. Behind him, the security camera red dot blinked, recording everything. He didn't notice. People never look up anymore. Mom, he said gently, you've always been so independent. But after last night, well, we just worry. He slid a brochure across the table. Sunset Manor, luxury living for the golden years. Photos of seniors doing yoga beside a fake lake. How thoughtful, I said. My voice could have frosted glass. I imagine the entrance fee isn't cheap. He cleared his throat. $400,000 up front, but that covers everything. We can help with the paperwork. Translation? With the transfer of funds. I'll consider it, I told him. He looked relieved enough to cry. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to pity. He was already digging his own grave with hope. When he left, I checked the feed from the driveway camera. He and Jessica argued again, this time less animated and more urgent. She handed him a folder. He shook his head. She pointed at the house, mouth forming a word that needed no audio. Money. I called David back. Begin paperwork for competency evaluation, I said. If they try anything legal, I want proof I'm lucid. He sighed. You think they'd go that far? I think greed has no age limit. By evening, I'd filed the party footage, the Instagram clip, and Rico's name into a folder labeled insurance. Not for money, for truth. Evidence ages like wine, only if you keep it cool and unopened until needed. As the sun fell behind the oaks, I stood at the window and watched shadows lengthen across the lawn my husband had once mowed. For the first time since he died, I spoke to him out loud. They think I'm old and tired, love. They're half right. I closed the curtains, locked the doors, and opened a fresh page in my legal pad. At the top, I wrote, Next move, make them think they're winning. If you're watching this far, leave a comment. What's the first sign you notice when someone's lying? Because the next time Jessica smiles, I'm going to count the beats between her teeth and the truth. When people want to take your power, they don't come for your throat first. They come for your comfort. By the third morning after the party, the air in my house felt heavy with performance. Every phone call was too sweet, every visit too prompt. Jessica texted at 7:05 a.m. Thinking of you, hope you got some rest. The heart emoji was the only part of her that had ever been genuine. An hour later, Michael called. Mom, Jess made pancakes. Why don't you come over for breakfast? Breakfast. That's the word people use when they're setting a trap and want you well fed before it closes. Still, I went. I needed to measure how close they thought they were to victory. Their house was new money, wrapped in bad taste. Quartz counters, chandeliers you could see from space, and a scent of artificial vanilla that made your eyes water. Jessica met me at the door, apron immaculate, hair too glossy to be sincere. "Sarah, we were just talking about you." "How flattering," I said. Let's hope it was kind. Helen's near death had apparently been downgraded to an unfortunate incident. Jessica's tone made it sound like her mother had spilled soup rather than ingested poison. "Doctors say she's fine now," Jessica chirped. "She doesn't remember much, thank goodness." Of course she didn't. Memory loss was convenient currency in Jessica's world. Breakfast began as a comedy of manners. Pancakes, strawberries, forced smiles. The kind of domestic tableau you'd see in an insurance commercial. Except the lines didn't match the eyes. "Mom," Michael began, "Jess and I were thinking, maybe it's time you had a little more support." "Support?" I echoed. "My Wi-Fi's solid, dear." He laughed nervously. "You know what I mean. You've worked hard all your life. You deserve peace. Maybe it's time to downsize, somewhere safe, with people around." Jessica set down her mimosa, her voice soft and calculated. "Michael found this wonderful place, Sunset Manor. It's not a nursing home, it's like a spa. There's a golf course, art classes, even weekly wine tastings." "Oh, how civilized," I said, biting into a strawberry. "I suppose the guests just die of old age, between Pilates and Cabernet?" Jessica froze mid-smile, then forced a laugh. "Oh, you're terrible." Michael slid a glossy brochure toward me. Sunset Manor, where every day feels like a vacation. I flipped through pages of staged serenity. Silver-haired couples painting sunsets, staff members smiling too wide to be real. Each photo looked like a eulogy with good lighting. The fine print was where the truth lived. Entrance fee, $400,000. Non-refundable. Medical evaluation required. Power of attorney documentation mandatory for expedited move-in. Mandatory. There it was, hiding between the paragraphs. The transfer of control disguised as care. "How long have you two been researching this?" I asked casually. Jessica didn't miss a beat. "Oh, months. We just wanted to wait until after your sale. You know, when things were settled." "How thoughtful. You waited until I became worth killing." I didn't say that part aloud. A clink interrupted us. Jessica's phone. She silenced it quickly, but not before I glimpsed the preview banner. Dr. Steinberg, Sunset Consultation Confirmation. I filed the name away. A good hunter remembers every sound in the forest. "Who's Dr. Steinberg?" I asked lightly. Jessica hesitated just long enough for guilt to clear its throat. "Oh, just the Manor's consulting psychiatrist. They have to make sure residents are mentally fit for admission." "How practical," I said. "Wouldn't want any of us showing signs of independent thought." Michael laughed again, but it sounded hollow. "It's just protocol, Mom." "Of course, I've lived 70 years on protocol." I smiled, wide and sharp. "Tell me, do they evaluate greed too, or only memory?" That ended breakfast. Back home, I called David. "They've found their next move," I said. "A place called Sunset Manor. Entrance fee of $400,000 and a Dr. Steinberg who signs off on mental fitness." David's voice tightened. "Steinberg. I know him. He's flexible with his conclusions." "Meaning?" "Meaning, if someone wants you declared incompetent, he can make it happen." I stared out at my garden, the same one my husband had planted. The roses were thriving, because they had thorns. "David, I want you to draft new directives," I said. "Financial, medical, legal." I want to make sure if anyone even whispers the word incompetent, my money goes to charity, not to them. He exhaled. Understood. That afternoon, I drove to St. Mary's under the pretense of checking on Helen. The nurse at the desk frowned when I asked for her. Mrs. Peterson was discharged yesterday. Did she sign herself out? The nurse blinked. No, her daughter did. Mrs. Hartwell said she'd recover better at home. Jessica again, always tidying loose ends before they unravel. On my way out, I saw Rico, the night nurse who'd helped me. Mrs. Wilson, right? He said. We got the tox results back on your friend. It was definitely oleander. Weird thing. The hospital reported it to the police, but I haven't seen any officers come by. Maybe they spoke to the family privately, I said, though we both knew which family member would make sure questions never got asked. Rico hesitated. The lab found traces on the champagne glass, too. I thought you should know. I appreciate that, Rico. You've been very helpful. I shook his hand, slipped him my card. If anyone else asks questions, send them to me. That evening, I opened the Sunset Manor website. It was polished enough to fool the lonely. Testimonials from residents whose smiles didn't reach their eyes. Financial pages hidden behind password prompts. I clicked Request More Information and entered a burner email address. Within minutes, an auto-reply arrived. Thank you for your interest. Our preferred legal partner for admissions is Dr. Richard Steinberg, geriatric specialist. Perfect. They were setting up their chessboard, and I finally saw all the pieces. At midnight, I poured myself another glass of champagne. From a bottle I opened myself, of course, and watched my security feed. The house was still, but my mind was not. There's a kind of quiet that comes before strategy. The same kind that filled boardrooms before multi-million-dollar takeovers. I knew that rhythm. And for the first time in 3 days, I smiled. They wanted to play caretaker? Fine. I'd let them think they were winning. Let them fill out every form, rehearse every signature. Then I'd show them what happens when you try to con a woman who built empires out of silence. If you're watching this, remember, predators call it protection right before they bite. Tell me in the comments, what's the most dangerous favor someone's ever offered you? Morning came dressed like a false apology. Warm light, clean air, birds doing their best to convince me the world was still kind. But I'd spent too many years in boardrooms to trust anything that opened with a smile. By 6 a.m., I'd already brewed my coffee and opened the ledger of my life. The paper trail that told the truth my family preferred to ignore. In the soft scratch of my pen, I began to rewrite the history they thought they owned. Page 1 was titled Debt and Delusion. Michael's architectural firm, $200,000 in unpaid invoices, 2 maxed business credit cards, and a pending lawsuit from an unpaid contractor. Jessica's boutique jewelry store, $70,000 in inventory loans, none of which were backed by actual assets. The website listed custom diamond pieces, but my private investigator, Patricia, would later confirm that half the stones were cubic zirconia. The glittering metaphor of their marriage. The luxury vehicles? Leased. The house in Westfield? Refinanced 3 times in 5 years. Every dollar they earned had been mortgaged twice before it existed. On the next page, I wrote, Motives. $23 million. My longevity, their debt, their entitlement. They didn't want to work for stability. They wanted me to die for it. By 9 a.m., Patricia called. Her voice was sharp and precise, the way only ex-corporate spies sound when they've found blood in the water. I've traced their accounts, she said. You were right. They're desperate. And there's something else you'll want to see. What's that? A life insurance policy filed 6 months ago. $500,000 payout on your name, with Jessica as the primary beneficiary. The silence on my end stretched long enough for her to add, "She claimed insurable interest as your caregiver." "How touching," I murmured. "Tell me she at least paid her own premiums?" "She did, but that's not all. Michael's been sending small payments to someone named Dr. Richard Steinberg. Recognize the name?" "Oh, yes," I said, smiling grimly. "The good doctor from Sunset Manor." Patricia exhaled. "You're not just being targeted for your money, Sarah. You're being prepared for it. This is a structured hit, psychological, financial, and legal." "I built a career reading structures," I said. "Now it's time to dismantle one." At noon, Jessica texted, "Hey, Sarah. Dr. Steinberg said he'd love to meet you sometime soon. He does intake evaluations for new residents at Sunset. He's the kindest man. Maybe coffee next week?" It was a sentence dressed like kindness, but sown with poison. Kindest man. That's what people say about wolves who haven't bitten them yet. I responded, "That sounds wonderful, dear. Let's plan it for next Friday. I'll bring cookies." And I would, the kind you bake while planning a counterstrike. By evening, Michael arrived again, visibly tired, but determined. He'd shaved, combed his hair, even worn the watch I'd gifted him for his college graduation. It was his good son costume, and he played the role with rehearsed conviction. "Mom," he began, "we just want to make sure you're safe. That's all." "You've mentioned that," I said, pouring him coffee. "Quite a lot lately." He smiled sheepishly. "It's just, well, after what happened to Helen, it scared us. We thought we were invincible, and then, boom, life reminds you it's fragile." "Indeed," I said. "Some reminders are almost lethal." He winced, but pressed on. "Sunset Manor called today. They have an open suite, but only for a few days. We'd hate for you to lose it." "Such urgency," I said, sipping my drink. "You'd think I were being evicted." Michael hesitated, then leaned forward. "Look, Mom, you've done everything yourself for so long. Let us help. Let me help. Jessica and I can handle the paperwork, the finances." "Power of attorney?" I asked smoothly. He froze. "Just temporary while you transition. It's what the manor requires." "Of course," I said, smiling. "I'll think about it. I want to do this properly." The relief that flooded his face would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. That night, I reviewed the security footage from the party and cross-referenced it with Clarice's Instagram video. Frame by frame, the truth unfolded like a confession. Jessica at the bar, vial in hand, mirror catching her reflection. My chipped champagne glass perfectly in view. I captured every frame, time-stamped it, and sent it to David with the note: "Insurance policy, Oleander, Steinberg, and this. Build me a fortress." By Thursday, the fortress took shape. David drafted new legal documents, medical directive. Only I could authorize treatment or release of information. Financial trust. Every transaction triggered an alert to an independent auditor. Automatic transfer clause. If anyone tried to declare me incompetent, my estate would divert entirely to a cancer research fund. They can't touch a dime unless you die of natural causes and willingly, David said. Then I'll make sure to live spitefully long, I replied. Friday morning arrived with the smell of danger masked by coffee and croissants. Michael and Jessica came over with a leather briefcase. Black, sleek, and far too formal for family matters. Inside, the Sunset Manor admission forms, financial disclosure sheets, and a blank power of attorney contract. This just gives me the authority to handle payments if you're too busy, Michael said. His tone was so smooth, I almost admired it. You'd still have full control, technically. Technically, I repeated, scanning the fine print. You'd also have access to my bank accounts, investments, property deeds, and the right to make temporary decisions in my absence. Quite the temporary privilege. Jessica laughed lightly. It's just a formality. They require it for safety. Oh, I understand, I said. Safety first. I took my pen, poised it above the signature line, and then paused. You know, I said softly, I remember your father teaching me that the most dangerous words in business were just a formality. That's how people lose companies. And sometimes, their lives. Jessica's smile faltered. Michael's jaw tightened. Let me sleep on it, I said sweetly. A decision this important deserves a clear head. They couldn't argue with that. They'd rehearsed everything, except resistance. That night, I met Patricia at a cafe downtown. She slid a USB drive across the table. Their communications. I hacked their shared cloud account. Tell me there's good news? Depends on your definition of good. They're in deeper than you thought. They've been planning your transition for 3 months. They even contacted a financial advisor at the manor about liquidating your assets before admission. I leaned back, absorbing the weight of it. And what about Steinberg? He's been paid monthly, consultation fees labeled health review. Looks like they wanted him ready to sign off the moment you stepped into that facility. Perfect, I said, smiling. Let's make sure he does, but not for me. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You're planning something, aren't you? Not planning, I said. Rehearsing. I returned home and placed the unsigned documents in my desk drawer, right next to the flash drive labeled Sunset Evidence. Tomorrow, they'd come again, expecting compliance. What they'd get was a performance, one that would end with handcuffs instead of signatures. If you're watching this, remember, in every family drama, someone's rehearsing their betrayal. The trick is to know your lines before they deliver theirs. Every great strategy meeting starts with coffee and silence. I brewed both the next morning. The house was spotless, sunlight leaking through the curtains like an accomplice. My legal pad sat open on the kitchen island beside a crystal bowl of lemons, decoration or distraction, depending on your angle. If my son and his wife wanted a performance, they'd get one. But I'd written the script this time. At exactly 9:01 a.m., the doorbell chimed. Michael, punctual. Jessica, polished. They came armed with the same briefcase, the same feigned concern, the same script, though this time I was ready for their improvisations. Mom, Michael said, voice smooth enough to butter granite. We were worried after you didn't call last night. You've been so quiet lately. I smiled, folding my hands. Quiet is how smart people think, dear. Noise is how nervous people hide it. Jessica let out a brittle laugh. We just want you to feel safe. You've done everything for everyone your whole life. It's time to let someone else take care of you. Someone else? I asked lightly. Or just you two? Jessica blinked. Of course, us. We're family. Good, I said, pouring coffee into 3 cups. Then, let's talk about the family plan. I slid a folder across the table, the one David had helped me prepare. Inside were blank copies of my version of the power of attorney papers, identical in appearance to theirs, but empty of legal potency. Decoys. I've been thinking, I said. Maybe you're right. A little help wouldn't hurt. Michael exhaled with visible relief. Jessica's manicured hand found his knee. The predators thought the rabbit had chosen the snare. But, I continued, before I sign anything, I'd like to test this arrangement. You'll handle some small things for me, sort of a dry run. Michael smiled too fast. Of course, whatever you need. I reached into the drawer, retrieved a small envelope, and slid it across the table. There's a check inside, $2,000. I want you to pay the landscaper and the housekeeper for the month, on time, no mistakes. Jessica's smile froze. 2,000? We could just transfer that for you. No, I said. Cash it. Hand deliver it. Make sure they're happy. Michael hesitated. That's a lot of errands, Mom. It's a test, I said sweetly. If I'm going to trust you with millions, I'd like to see how you handle thousands. Jessica's lips tightened. Michael nodded, trying to mask irritation. Fair enough. We'll take care of it today. Wonderful, I said. Because trust, my loves, is earned, not inherited. After they left, I received an unexpected call from a shaky but familiar voice. Sarah, it's Helen. I need to see you. I told her to come right over. When she arrived, she looked older than her years, pale but lucid. I've remembered something, she said, clutching her purse like a shield. The night of the party? Jessica told me not to drink too fast. She said she'd added something special to your glass, something to make it sparkle more. I thought she meant flavoring. My breath slowed. And she said this to you directly? Helen nodded, trembling. When I woke up in the hospital, Jessica was sitting beside me. She told me it must have been a bad reaction, that I'd embarrassed her. Sarah, my own daughter, lied to me in a hospital bed. I studied her face, the raw hurt there. Ah, Helen, I said softly. She didn't want to embarrass you. She wanted to bury me. The color drained from her face. She tried to kill you, and I... Don't, I interrupted gently. You didn't know, but you can help me now. Helen took a deep breath. What do you need? Honesty and courage. She nodded slowly. I have both left, though not much else. That afternoon, we sat in my study and mapped the plan like two generals who'd survived the first battle, but knew the war was far from over. I showed Helen the insurance documents, the Instagram footage, and Patricia's investigation notes. She read each line in stunned silence. She insured your life, she whispered. She values me more dead than alive, I replied. But we're going to change the exchange rate. We decided Helen would play the confused mother for a few more days, pretend not to remember the details of the poisoning. She would keep contact with Jessica light, sympathetic, and seemingly forgiving. The idea was simple. Keep Jessica confident. A cornered snake bites. A complacent one slithers into the trap. Sarah, Helen said before leaving. I don't know how you're staying so calm. I smiled thinly. I ran a consulting firm for 40 years, dear. I've been betrayed by men in suits worth more than my house. A daughter-in-law with a manicure doesn't scare me. By evening, I'd already received 3 texts from Jessica. Mom, just checking if you're feeling okay. We handled the bills. Everything's taken care of. Dinner tomorrow? We'd love to show you some Sunset Manor videos. Too eager. Too quick. They'd paid no one. I verified. My housekeeper called to say, Mrs. Wilson, your son said I'd get the payment next week. Caught. Predictable. They'd failed the simplest test of trust, and in doing so, confirmed my next move. I called Patricia. We're going to escalate. I want to know everything about their financial transactions over the last 48 hours. Track credit card use, ATM withdrawals, anything that smells of panic. Patricia chuckled softly. You sound like you're about to close a hostile takeover. I am, I said. Of my own family. Later that night, I set the stage for Act 2. I adjusted the camera angles in my living room, kitchen, and driveway, making sure every word, every twitch of deceit would be captured. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and began recording a video journal, not for YouTube this time, but for the authorities. If you're watching this, I began, my voice steady, then something has happened to me. My son and daughter-in-law have attempted to acquire my assets through fraud, manipulation, and attempted murder. The following evidence will explain everything. I laid it out methodically. The party footage, the Instagram video, the insurance policy, the Sunset Manor connection, Steinberg's role. Every detail time-stamped and cross-referenced. When I finished, I saved the video to a secure drive that auto-uploaded to David's office cloud every night at midnight. Then I placed a second copy in a sealed envelope marked to be opened in the event of my death or disappearance. Paranoia? No. Preparation. At 10:03 p.m., the phone rang. Michael. Mom, Jessica feels awful about how pushy we've been. She thinks dinner tomorrow might help smooth things over. I think that's a splendid idea, I said. I'll cook. He paused. Really? You don't want us to bring anything? Oh, no, dear, I said with a smile he couldn't see. This time, I insist. As I hung up, the camera light above the doorway blinked red. Every second was being recorded. The next day's dinner would be their dry run, and my grand rehearsal for justice. If you're watching this, tell me, would you invite the people who tried to kill you back into your kitchen? Because I would. And I did. If there's one thing I learned from 40 years in business, it's this. People are at their most honest when they think they're winning. So I set the table for victory. The dining room gleamed like a stage. Silver polished, candles trimmed, wine glasses glinting under the chandelier's soft light. To anyone else, it looked like reconciliation. To me, it was theater. And every great show needs an audience. The security cameras were rolling, hidden behind the floral arrangements, one in the corner of the dining room mirror, one tucked inside the bookshelf across from the table. David and Patricia would be watching the feed remotely. I'd asked them to monitor my health, but what I really meant was record my proof. The front doorbell chimed precisely at 7 mile. Punctuality, the only honest habit Michael ever inherited from me. Mom, Michael said, stepping inside with a cautious smile. You look beautiful. Jessica followed, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Poisonous, if ingested. The irony was lost on her. How thoughtful, I said, taking the flowers. Lilies for purity, a perfect fit. Jessica's voice dripped sugar. I just wanted tonight to be about starting fresh. Yes, I said, arranging the lilies into a vase. Fresh starts are good, especially when you know what went rotten. Her smile twitched. What do you mean? Oh, nothing. Let's eat before the food gets cold. The meal was elegant, restrained. Roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, the same champagne brand as the retirement party. I poured 3 glasses, noting how Jessica's eyes flicked toward the bottle label like a woman checking the barrel of a gun. Relax, dear, I said. I opened this one myself. She let out a small, nervous laugh. Michael raised his glass. To family, he said. To truth, I replied. We clinked glasses. Halfway through dinner, I sighed and leaned back, playing my role. The tired matriarch surrendering control. I've been thinking about what you said, I began softly. About Sunset Manor. About safety. Jessica's eyes brightened. Really? That's wonderful. Michael's fork paused midair. You mean I've decided to sign the papers tomorrow morning, I said. I think you're right. It's time to let someone else handle things. Michael exhaled. Mom, that's great. You won't regret this. Jessica reached across the table to squeeze my hand, her nails digging just enough to draw notice. We'll take care of everything. I smiled gently. I'm sure you will. Then, almost as an afterthought, I added, but before I sign, I want to do something symbolic, a little toast to new chapters. You know, something memorable. Michael hesitated. Now? Yes, dear. Why wait? I rose, retrieved a smaller bottle of champagne from the counter, the one Jessica herself had brought to the party, and placed it before them. Her hand trembled. Barely, but enough. Jessica, I said, removing the cork with a soft pop. I wanted to ask about this brand. You chose it, didn't you? She blinked. Yes, why? Oh, I was just curious. I found a small vial near the recycling bin after the party. Looked like something from your purse. Her pupils shrank. What are you implying? That's a very good question, I said. Here's a better one. Why was there oleander extract in the champagne you opened? Silence. Michael froze. Jessica's face drained of color. That's ridiculous, she said finally. I don't even know what oleander is. Funny, I said, sliding my phone across the table. On screen, Clarice's Instagram video paused at the exact frame showing Jessica with the vial reflected in the mirror. Because the internet seems to disagree. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Mom, Michael said quickly, voice shaking. There must be an explanation. Oh, there is, I said evenly. I just want to hear hers. Jessica stood abruptly. This is insane. You're trying to set me up. No, dear, I said, taking a sip of champagne. You did that yourself. Sarah, Michael said, standing too now, hands raised in desperation. Please, this isn't what it looks like. Then enlighten me, I said. Because from where I sit, it looks like my daughter-in-law tried to poison me for money while my son helped her prepare the paperwork to steal the rest. Michael's voice broke. I didn't know. I thought it was just a scare tactic. Jessica turned on him like a cornered animal. You lying coward, you knew everything. You signed off on the insurance policy. What insurance policy? I asked, feigning ignorance. Jessica froze. Realization dawned in her eyes. You... Yes, I said softly. I know about that too. For a moment, the room was a symphony of panic. Jessica pacing, Michael stammering, the clink of glass as someone's hand shook too hard. You can't prove anything? Jessica finally shouted. Oh, I think I can. I pointed to the blinking light on the bookshelf. Say hello to the camera, dear. You're on Candid Confession. Jessica spun, spotting the small red dot. You recorded us? Of course I did. I record everything now. Age makes one forgetful, remember? Before they could recover, the doorbell rang. 3 sharp knocks. Perfect timing. Michael's eyes darted toward the hallway. Who is that? Why don't we find out? I said. I opened the door to reveal Detective Lisa Morrison and her partner, exactly as planned. Mrs. Wilson, Morrison said, flashing her badge. You called about a poisoning case? Right on cue, I said. Please, come in. I believe you'll find the suspects still digesting dinner. Jessica tried to bolt, but Morrison's partner blocked her path. Jessica Hartwell, the detective said calmly. "You're under arrest for attempted murder." The sound of handcuffs clicked through the house like punctuation on a long, bitter sentence. Michael collapsed into a chair, face ghost white. I swear, I didn't know she'd actually—" Morrison's partner interrupted. "You can explain that downtown, sir?" Jessica turned on me one last time, eyes wild with fury. "You think you've won, you old witch? You have no idea what's coming." "Oh, Jessica," I said, my voice soft but razor-edged. "I've known what's coming for days. I just let it arrive at my convenience." She lunged once, purely reflex, before the officer held her back. Her bracelet snapped, scattering tiny diamonds across the floor. Fitting, I thought. Shattered illusions, cheap stones. As they led her out, Michael looked up at me, tears streaking his cheeks. "Mom, please. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." I looked at my son, the man I'd raised, the man who'd let greed hollow him out. For a moment, I almost reached for him. Then I remembered the champagne glass, the insurance policy, the look in his eyes when he'd said, "You won't regret it, Mom." "I know," I said quietly. "You just didn't want to wait." As the police car pulled away, the camera light blinked off. The lilies on the table smelled faintly sweet, almost masking the scent of fear that lingered in the air. I sat alone for a long while, staring at the empty glasses, the untouched dessert. Somewhere between victory and heartbreak, I realized what survival really costs. If you're watching this, remember, family betrayal doesn't begin with hatred. It begins with need, and it ends with someone walking away from the table alive. By sunrise, my house was quiet again, too quiet for the mess that had exploded only hours earlier. Police tape fluttered faintly at the edge of my driveway, an ugly yellow reminder that even victory leaves debris. The champagne glasses still sat on the table, one half empty, one untouched, and one shattered during Jessica's last outburst. I left them there. Evidence should be seen before it's cleaned. When I looked in the mirror that morning, I saw a woman who'd outlived every trap laid for her, but not without scars. There's no manual for surviving your own family's attempted murder. There's only instinct and the quiet ache that comes when love turns into strategy. By 9 a.m., my lawyer, David Hartwell, was seated across from me, looking both exhausted and impressed. His tie was crooked. That never happened. "Well," he said, flipping through a file. "That was efficient." "I've always preferred clean endings," I said, sipping black coffee, "though this one came with a bit of broken glass." He nodded. "Jessica's in county jail, charged with attempted murder and insurance fraud. Michael's being held for questioning, aiding and abetting, potential conspiracy. But it'll get complicated." "Complicated?" David leaned forward. "Michael's already cooperating. He claims he never knew about the poison, that Jessica manipulated him. He's positioning himself as an accessory through ignorance." I snorted. Ignorance is a poor defense when it comes with a payment history to a corrupt psychiatrist. David smiled grimly. "Which brings us to Dr. Richard Steinberg." Patricia traced his payments, monthly deposits from Michael's firm. "We've already handed everything to the detectives." "And the insurance policy?" "Voided. Fraudulent claim, clear as day. The company's opening an investigation into Jessica. You'll likely be called as a witness." "Let them," I said. "I've spent my whole life explaining numbers. This time, I'll explain human arithmetic. Greed minus morality equals prison." David chuckled. You're remarkable, Sarah. Most people would be in shock. Oh, I am, I said softly. But shock and strategy are not mutually exclusive. By afternoon, the news had leaked. Of course it had. Local businesswoman survives poisoning at retirement party. Daughter-in-law arrested. It played on every local channel, complete with a picture of me from 10 years ago and a blurred photo of Jessica being escorted in handcuffs. Clarice, my ever-helpful neighbor, texted me a link with the caption, "You're trending on Twitter, Sarah." Champagne justice. I almost laughed. Almost. Then came the reporters. 2 vans parked outside before lunch, camera crews hoping for a quote. I opened the door long enough to say, "This isn't a story about murder. It's a story about misplaced entitlement. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have roses to prune." They left after that, partly out of shock, partly because I meant it. A week later, Detective Morrison called. "Mrs. Wilson, Jessica's requesting to see you," she said. "It's your choice." "Is she allowed to have poison in prison?" I asked. Morrison laughed under her breath. "No, ma'am." "Then I'll come." The visit took place in a sterile interview room. Jessica looked smaller, her perfect hair gone limp, her nails unpolished, stripped of the armor she used to disguise her emptiness. "Sarah," she said, her voice brittle, "you ruined my life." I met her gaze. "You tried to take mine. Seems fair." Her jaw trembled. "I never meant for it to go that far. I panicked. We were drowning in debt. Michael said you'd help if you saw how much we needed you." "So you decided to poison me into compassion?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to be fatal. Just enough to make you faint, make you scared. Michael said we could convince you to sign over some control afterward." "That's not panic, Jessica," I said. "That's calculation." She swallowed hard. "You don't understand what it's like, being married to someone who grew up rich and failed to live up to it. Every dinner, every holiday, he'd talk about you. How successful you were, how independent. I wanted to be admired like that." "Then you should have worked for it," I said simply. Her eyes turned cold. "You're not a saint, Sarah. You built your fortune off people like me. Desperate, trusting, easy to manipulate." I tilted my head. "Perhaps. But I never killed anyone to do it." The guard signaled time. As I stood, Jessica whispered, "Michael will never forgive you." I paused at the door. "He doesn't need to. He needs to remember me." 2 days later, Michael asked to see me. Against David's advice, I went. He looked 10 years older in a week. Gray at the temples, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. "Mom," he said quietly. I didn't know she'd go that far. "Yes, you did," I said. "You just hoped I wouldn't notice." He bowed his head. "I thought we could scare you into trusting us. She said once you were in the home, you'd relax, we'd handle things." "Handle things," I repeated. "You mean drain the accounts and declare me incompetent with your friendly psychiatrist?" He winced. "It wasn't supposed to be this way. I just wanted a chance to fix everything." "You mean fix the hole you dug by living above your means?" He didn't deny it. "I'm sorry." "No," I said softly. "You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." He covered his face. "They're offering me a plea deal, 3 years, maybe less if I cooperate." "Then take it," I said. "Use the time to learn humility. It's cheaper than therapy." He looked up, eyes glistening. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it for a long time. "No, but I don't trust you." And for a mother, that's worse. When I left, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The weeks that followed were strange, quiet, almost eerie. My house became my sanctuary and my fortress. The cameras stayed. The panic button stayed, but I replaced the champagne glasses. Symbolism matters. David and Patricia handled the legal cleanup. Steinberg lost his license. Jessica's bail was denied. Michael pled guilty. The insurance company returned every penny of Jessica's premiums. David sent me a letter summarizing the victory. Your estate is now legally bulletproof. Even God would need a co-signer to change it. I pinned that letter to my corkboard, not out of arrogance, but as a reminder. Protection isn't paranoia when the danger wears your last name. Evenings were the hardest. That's when my husband's old chair sat empty, the one where he used to read with Michael as a boy. I'd catch myself wondering, where did I go wrong? Was it when I said yes too many times? When I mistook indulgence for love? The thing about betrayal is it doesn't happen overnight. It's built one small favor at a time. Helen became my companion in those long evenings. We met twice a week for coffee. Two women who'd survived their family's failures. She was working on a book about elder financial abuse. I promised to help edit it. You think people will believe it? She asked one afternoon. Only the ones who've lived it, I said. We laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was recognition. Then one night, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma, my granddaughter. Grandma, Mom's trial is next month. I don't know how to feel. Can I visit you this weekend? I wrote back immediately. Of course, sweetheart. There's always a place for you here. Because amid the wreckage, there was still one life untouched by greed. One branch of the family tree worth saving. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real inheritance I could pass on. If you're watching this, remember, forgiveness isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over poison. But never mistake forgiveness for forgetting. Memory is the armor that keeps you alive. There's a strange chill in courtrooms, not from the air conditioning, but from the realization that truth is about to stop being abstract. That morning, as I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table, the world that had once been my family prepared to be measured in evidence, exhibits, and sentencing recommendations. The bailiff called the case. State of New Jersey versus Jessica Hartwell and Michael Wilson. Jessica entered first, dressed in gray, not orange, her attorney's attempt at humanity. Her hair was flat, her confidence flatter. Michael followed, eyes hollow, hands cuffed loosely in front of him. I caught a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who built Lego towers at my feet and asked if people ever stopped being afraid of the dark. Apparently not. The prosecutor, a crisp woman named Nora Patel, didn't waste time on theatrics. Your Honor, she began, this case is about greed. About a son and daughter-in-law who plotted to steal from and eventually kill a 70-year-old woman whose only mistake was loving them. She gestured to the evidence board. Photos of my dining room, the Instagram video, a close-up of the oleander vial, the toxicology report, and the life insurance policy. Jessica Hartwell poisoned champagne meant for her mother-in-law, Sarah Wilson. The plan was to stage a medical emergency that would convince Mrs. Wilson she was unwell, opening the door for financial guardianship under Dr. Richard Steinberg's fraudulent evaluation. Jessica's lawyer, a man with a $2,000 haircut and a $0 conscience, objected. Speculation. Withdrawn, Patel said smoothly. We'll let the recordings speak for themselves. The courtroom speakers clicked on. My voice filled the air. You can't prove anything, Jessica had shouted that night. Say hello to the camera, dear. I'd replied. The video played for less than 30 seconds, but it was enough. Jessica's face, caught mid-denial, froze on the screen. The jury's reaction was instant, a quiet ripple of disgust, disbelief, pity. You can't fake sincerity when you're cornered. Even strangers can smell it. When my turn came to testify, I stood, adjusted my blazer, and walked to the witness stand with the steadiness of someone who'd already survived the worst possible cross-examination. Motherhood. Jessica's attorney smiled, like a man trying to charm a shark. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "you're a very successful woman, aren't you?" "I've done all right," I replied, "and you're accustomed to being in control." "I'm accustomed to being alive, counselor. Control helps with that." A few muffled laughs rippled through the courtroom. The judge didn't bother to gavel them down. He pressed on. "Would it be fair to say you can be demanding? I have high standards. Poison isn't one of them." He frowned. "You claim to have seen my client tamper with your champagne, yet you didn't alert anyone immediately?" "No," I said. I wanted to see what kind of people I'd raised. His expression flickered, not because of the answer, but because the words hit exactly where I meant them to. Sometimes, you don't win arguments, you make them unnecessary. When Michael took the stand, the room shifted. The jury leaned forward. Even the judge's pen paused mid-note. He looked like a man halfway through drowning. Still moving, still pleading, but already gone. "Did you know your wife planned to poison your mother?" the prosecutor asked. Michael swallowed. "Not exactly. I knew she was going to do something dramatic. She said she wanted to scare Mom into trusting us with her care. I thought it was stupid, not criminal." Patel's tone hardened. "So you knew about the plan, but not the method?" "Yes." "And you didn't stop her?" Michael's shoulders slumped. I thought she was bluffing. I watched him, my son, my blood, crumble under the weight of his own cowardice. That's the thing about greed. It's not just hunger for money. It's hunger for shortcuts, for comfort without courage. When the defense rested, Michael looked at me once, not seeking forgiveness, just confirmation that he still existed. I didn't give him either. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, their faces said everything. "On the charge of attempted murder," the foreperson read, "we find the defendant, Jessica Hartwell, guilty." Jessica's jaw clenched. Her attorney's hand on her shoulder might as well have been a leash. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse, we find Michael Wilson, guilty." A sharp inhale from somewhere in the audience. Maybe Helen, who'd been quietly crying behind me. The judge thanked the jury and turned to the defendants. "Mrs. Hartwell, your actions were deliberate, deceitful, and monstrous. You will serve 15 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for 10. Jessica's face went blank, the color draining like spilled paint. "Mr. Wilson," the judge continued, "your cowardice cost you more than money. It cost you a family. You will serve 3 years for conspiracy and fraud, with eligibility for release after 18 months. Michael didn't look up. He just nodded once, like a man accepting weather. The gavel struck, and just like that, the story that began with a champagne glass ended with handcuffs. Outside, reporters waited again. Flashbulbs, microphones, questions hurled like stones. "Mrs. Wilson, any comment on the verdict? Do you forgive your son? Will you press civil charges?" I stopped, squared my shoulders, and said only this. Justice isn't revenge. It's remembering who you are when everyone else forgets. Then I walked away. Helen met me on the courthouse steps. She looked frail, but fierce. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said. "They did it to themselves. I just kept the receipts." Over the following weeks, the shockwaves spread. Steinberg's medical license was revoked. His clinic was raided. Half his patients were wealthy elders suddenly deemed incompetent by families eager to cash out their estates. Michael's firm dissolved. The house in Westfield, that gaudy temple of debt, went to auction. Jessica's boutique closed overnight. Her storefront now displayed an eviction notice. The tabloids had their fun. "Mother-in-law from hell or hero?" one headline screamed. I didn't read the rest. The truth didn't need publicity. It just needed time. 3 weeks later, I stood in my garden again. The roses were blooming, crimson, unapologetic. Helen joined me, bringing 2 cups of tea. 15 years, she said quietly. "Do you think that's enough?" "It's not about years," I replied. "It's about reflection. She'll have plenty of mirrors in there." Helen smiled weakly. "And Michael?" I sighed. "He'll get out, maybe sooner than he deserves. But he'll never find what he was looking for. Not in money, not in family. That's his real sentence." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of bees and the world moving on without permission. That night, I wrote in my journal, "When people think they're entitled to your life, make sure they leave with none of it." Then I poured one final glass of champagne. My brand, my bottle, my glass. No poison this time, only peace. If you're watching this, remember, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Right after the gavel falls and before the next sip of champagne. The day after the sentencing, the house felt impossibly quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from peace, but the kind that follows a storm so violent it changes the landscape. The marble floor where Helen had collapsed was spotless again. The cameras still blinked in their corners, but now their presence felt less like protection and more like proof that I'd lived through something no mother should. For the first time in months, I didn't wake to fear. I woke to the smell of coffee and the hum of life continuing. Birds outside, the mailman's routine, the world politely pretending it hadn't been watching my family on the evening news. I sat by the window and thought about what justice really gives you. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't erase the betrayal. It just hands you the truth and asks, "Now what?" When the doorbell rang that afternoon, I half expected more reporters, or worse, pity. Instead, it was Emma. My granddaughter stood there, suitcase in hand, wearing the same nervous smile her father once had when he came home late from curfew. She was 16 now, tall, thoughtful, and far too grown for the world she'd been forced to see. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly. "Is it still okay that I visit?" I hugged her before she finished the sentence. "You never have to ask me that." Inside, she set her bag by the stairs and looked around with quiet curiosity, as though she was trying to reconcile the house in the headlines with the home she remembered. "It feels smaller," she said finally. "It's not the house," I replied. "It's the people missing from it." She nodded, eyes downcast. "Dad called me from jail. He said to tell you he's sorry." I sighed. He's had a lot of practice saying that word lately. Emma hesitated. "Do you hate him?" The question hung in the air, sharp and fragile. "No," I said at last. "I just don't trust him. There's a difference." We sat on the back porch, the garden blooming wild behind us. Roses, lavender, the stubborn resilience of things that grow after being cut down. Emma sipped lemonade, her hands trembling slightly. "Grandma," she said, "everyone at school's talking about it. Some kids say your story's like something from a movie. Others say you're cold." "Cold?" I repeated. "They don't understand how you could just turn your son in." I smiled faintly. "I didn't turn him in, sweetheart. He turned himself, with every lie, every excuse, every time he chose comfort over conscience." She stared at her glass, thoughtful. "Mom used to say you cared more about your company than your family." "That's the funny thing about success," I said. "People who don't understand it think it's selfish. But success doesn't kill love. Greed does." Emma looked up, tears threatening. "I'm scared I'll end up like them." "You won't," I said firmly. "You ask questions, you doubt yourself. Evil never doubts. It just takes." She exhaled shakily, a small smile flickering. "You sound like you're giving a TED Talk." I laughed. "I suppose I've had a lot of practice lately. Maybe I'll call it How Not to Raise a Murderer." That made her laugh for real, and in that sound, fragile, nervous, but genuine, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe healing wasn't dramatic. Maybe it was just laughter returning to a house that hadn't heard it in far too long. Over the next few weeks, Emma helped me restore the garden. It became our therapy. She'd dig, I'd prune. She'd ask questions, I'd answer them honestly, even the uncomfortable ones. "Do you think Dad loved you?" she asked one afternoon, her hands covered in soil. "I think he did once," I said. "Then he loved what I could give him more." She frowned. "How do you stop that from happening?" "By remembering the difference between gratitude and expectation," I said. "Gratitude is a gift. Expectation is a debt. Never let anyone confuse the two." She nodded slowly, tucking that lesson somewhere deep. The way I once tucked away my own mother's warnings about men in suits and contracts too good to be true. By the end of summer, the garden was thriving again. Roses climbed the trellis in thick, defiant blooms. Life was louder now. Bees, laughter, wind chimes. The house no longer felt like a crime scene. It felt like a fortress with open windows. In September, a letter arrived, Michael's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away. Instead, I read it once, standing at the counter. "Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now. How blind I was. Jessica convinced me we were victims. But the truth is, we were just spoiled. I've been talking to a counselor here. He says people like me spend their lives confusing help with control. I guess that's what I did to you. I wanted your help, but resented your strength. I hope Emma grows up more like you than me. Love, Michael." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not forgiveness, not closure, just record keeping. Some memories deserve paper instead of conversation. 2 months later, I received an email from a financial wellness conference. Someone had read about my case and wanted me to speak about elder financial protection and family trust law. My first instinct was to decline. I didn't want to become a spectacle. But then I thought of Emma, of how she'd looked at me that first day, frightened and uncertain, and realized maybe the story wasn't just mine anymore. So I accepted. On the day of the talk, I stood before a room full of professionals, retirees, and adult children with notebooks. I told them about trust documents, about power of attorney abuse, about red flags. But I also told them about love, guilt, and the quiet ways manipulation disguises itself as concern. Money doesn't ruin families, I said at the end. Silence does. The moment you stop asking questions, that's when the poison starts working. The room was still when I finished. Then, slowly, applause filled the space. Not the hollow kind people give because they're supposed to, but the kind that comes from recognition. That night, I got a text from Emma. Grandma, I watched your speech online. I think I want to study law. Not the kind Dad used to do. The kind that protects people like you. I smiled, tears welling for the first time in months. Then you'll make a fine lawyer, sweetheart. Justice runs in our blood. We just had to clean it first. By winter, the garden had gone bare again, but it didn't feel empty. The roses would return, and so would life. Sometimes I'd still hear echoes. Jessica's shrill denial, Michael's apologies. But they faded with every sunrise. On Christmas Eve, Emma and I sat by the fire, watching the snow fall through the window. She looked up and asked, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," I said finally. "I wish people had gone differently, but life did what it always does. It told the truth. We just had to listen." Outside, the world was silent and clean, like a fresh sheet of paper waiting to be written on. If you're watching this, remember, survival isn't about winning. It's about continuing, with clarity, with boundaries, and with just enough love left to make the next chapter worth reading. It's strange, isn't it? How survival eventually turns into routine. There was a time when I woke every morning half expecting the next disaster. A shadow at the window, a phone call, another betrayal disguised as affection. But months turned into a year, and the rhythm of my life softened. The fear became memory, and the memory became fuel. People like to say, "Time heals all wounds." They're wrong. Time just teaches you how to live with the scar without tracing it every morning. On the anniversary of the party, the night that nearly ended me, I stood once again in my kitchen. No guests this time. No laughter, no champagne glasses clinking. Just quiet, deliberate peace. I poured myself a glass of wine, not champagne. I've had enough bubbles for a lifetime. And watched the light reflect off the marble floor where Helen had fallen. The spot was as white as the day it was installed, but I could still see it in my mind. The chaos, the screaming, the foam at her mouth. That image no longer haunted me. It educated me. Survival has a way of sharpening your gratitude. I was grateful for the silence, for the emptiness, for the absence of people who smiled at me with sharpened teeth. The phone rang. It was Helen. She'd just finished her first manuscript draft for The Golden Cage, How Families Prey on Their Elders. "Sarah," she said, "you're the heart of this story. I couldn't have written it without you." "Then make sure people learn from it," I replied. "I don't care if they remember my name, just let them remember the warning." The invitation. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived from Northwestern University. Emma had been accepted early to their pre-law program. She sent me a copy of her essay titled, "The Power of Saying No." When my grandmother said no, it saved her life. When my father couldn't, it nearly destroyed his. I want to build a life where I can protect others from the people who pretend to love them only when they're useful. I read it 3 times. Each line was both heartbreak and healing stitched together. That evening, I framed the essay and hung it beside my husband's portrait in the study. The two legacies of my life, one built on ambition, the other on endurance, finally sharing a wall. By spring, the calls began. Podcasts, news shows, a documentary producer from Netflix. Everyone wanted the story, the scandal, the spectacle, the 70-year-old woman who outsmarted her would-be murderers. I turned most of them down. Not out of fear, but because I'd learned the difference between sharing your truth and selling it. Some stories are meant to teach, not entertain. But one invitation I accepted. A financial empowerment seminar for women over 50. They called it Second Chapters. When I stepped onto that stage, there were no cameras, no makeup artists, just a room of women who had lost something: trust, money, confidence. I looked at them and saw pieces of myself. I was poisoned, I began. But the real toxin wasn't in the champagne. It was in the lies I believed. That love excuses everything. That age makes you powerless. That silence keeps the peace. You could have heard a pin drop. Then I smiled. The antidote isn't revenge. It's awareness. It's paperwork. And it's a spine made of steel. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, certain, like rain on a roof, the sound of women reclaiming something that had been quietly stolen from them. Every few months, Michael wrote me from prison. Some letters were apologies, others were essays, reflections on pride, on the cost of ambition, on the cracks between love and greed. I replied once, briefly, "Michael, I believe in second chances, but not without accountability. You don't owe me words. You owe yourself change." Mom. He never wrote back again. Sometimes silence is the only honest reply a son can give. Jessica, I never heard from again. Helen told me she'd joined a rehabilitation group inside. Something about teaching literacy to inmates. Maybe that's her redemption. Maybe it's performance. Either way, it's her burden now, not mine. By midsummer, I'd taken up painting. My studio overlooked the garden, where the roses bloomed brighter than ever, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. I painted them endlessly, in every color. Blood red, gold, white, the shades of survival. Art became the place where control wasn't necessary. Every stroke was permission to feel again. Emma visited often before heading to college. We cooked together, made jokes about our family crime saga, and planned a trip to Italy for her first summer break. One afternoon, she found the security footage archives on my desktop. "You kept all of this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Reminders are important, but I only watch them when I forget how strong I am." She smiled. "You won't forget." "I hope not," I said. "But memory is tricky. It fades, so you plant things that don't." I gestured to the garden outside. Every rose out there, that's a memory with roots. That autumn, I hosted a small gathering. Just a few friends, Helen and Emma, before she left for college. No fanfare, no gifts, no champagne this time. Only wine I poured myself. When the glasses were full, I raised mine and said, "To new beginnings that don't erase old lessons." Helen smiled. "And to surviving your own story." Emma added, "And to not letting history repeat itself." We clinked glasses, the sound soft but sure. Not celebration, but affirmation. After they left, I sat alone on the porch. The sun was setting. The same honey-colored sky that had witnessed every chapter of my life. For once, it didn't feel like a countdown. It felt like a continuation. People often ask me, in interviews, letters, emails, how it feels to outlive betrayal. My answer never changes. It feels like freedom with a bruise. You don't forget the impact, but you stop letting it define your movement. If you've been betrayed, poisoned, stolen from, metaphorically or otherwise, here's what I've learned. The moment you start trusting your instincts again, you start healing. Kindness doesn't mean surrender. And peace, real peace, isn't found in revenge. It's found in the discipline to live well when others wanted you gone. As I write this, the house hums quietly around me, full of air, light, and proof that age doesn't mean weakness, and wealth doesn't mean foolishness. It just means you've got more to lose, and more worth protecting. I might be 71 now, but I am sharper, calmer, and freer than I've ever been. And that, perhaps, is the best revenge of all. If you're watching this, thank you for staying till the end. Subscribe if you believe survival can be elegant, and in the comments, tell me, what would you protect, even if it cost you everything? Because in the end, that's what defines us. Not what we own, but what we refuse to surrender.